On Point is brought to you by Dargin Global.
Happy New Year and good evening. Welcome to a brand new episode of On Point. My name is Patria K. Charles.
Otherwise known as Mrs. C, and I'm Dennis Chung.
Mr. C. How you do?
I'm good. How's it? Well, I don't have to ask how the New Year is.
It was phenomenal, glowing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes.
But we started off the year as a country on a couple of notes that are tragic. Let's start with this matter of not one but two women who have died at the hands of their intimate partners already.
You know, I think it's a sad situation that we're in, but the truth is that what we're seeing now didn't start today. It started a long time ago with, I think, the development of the indiscipline and disorder we've seen in the society. Kevin O'Brien Chang, who we'll have later on in the show, actually posted something on social media, which I agree with totally. A lot of the acting out that you're seeing now comes from a lot of the lyrics of the songs that people have been hearing for years. And it's compounded by the fact that a lot of the lyrics that we hear are out there because there's no control on the night noise. So when children are sleeping in their beds, they're hearing this music, in their subconscious, and they've been hearing that for years.
I still also think that we have an issue with settling disputes generally.
Yeah.
I recall when I was in grade 3 and there was a boy who fought a girl. And the punishment for fighting the girl was the teacher beat him senseless. And even at that age, I couldn't understand how the punishment and the crime were the same thing. I couldn't understand it. He beat a girl and you beat him for beating the girl, and it just didn't make sense to me. So there's a culture of violence that's been ingrained with us that we have to address in a big way. And it spills over into crime, which affects business, which affects society, and we have to fix it.
What doesn't make it any better is that you have the crimes that you commit, which are small crimes, small infractions. But the truth is that when the small infractions are committed from you growing up from a child, and you get to a teenager and maybe you commit some infraction in your society, right? There's no enforcement. So then you say, okay, if there's no enforcement for this small one, let me try a bigger one. And you keep getting away with it. To the point now where the taxis are driving on the roads. And in plain sight, I saw 4 policemen sign up a stoplight the other day directing traffic, and a busman was illegally parked waiting on passengers.
Well, on the vein
and nobody did nothing.
Getting away with it, there are some corporate entities that have not gotten away with infringements on the plastic ban that's been implemented. There are some companies who were taken in front of the courts. They've had to pay fines, and it seems as if there is an effort to ensure that the plastic ban that's been implemented, and now the styrofoam ban also implemented come January 1, that there's an effort to ensure that there is, that people adhere to the rules and regulations.
Well, that's certain people adhere, because if you go to the jerk chicken man and the fruit vendor, they're still using it. And I can guarantee you they're not going to go down there and enforce something against them.
There's also a question as to what are the alternatives that we've put in place. There's still an education gap. Many of the food establishments that you go to, they've stopped giving you styrofoam, but them give you a plastic container that you eat out of and throw in the garbage. 6 or 1 half dozen the other. Absolutely. So we haven't found the solution. There's still an education gap, and there's still a solution gap that we haven't found.
I started reading this book called The Art of War. And you know, what he says is very profound. He says people don't fail because they pursue the wrong thing. People fail because they don't do it the right way. And that for me was very profound. And
Very profound.
yeah, I think many times we fail in this country with policy because we don't do it the right way.
On the garbage front, plastic bags, we're trying to tackle that.
Yeah.
Styrofoam that kicked in January 1. I've heard communication that we're looking to do cashback for plastic bottles, and that hopefully that will make a turnaround. But garbage, this is a space that you are in, and garbage is a perennial issue for the country. How do we fix it? How do we make it better in 2020? What do I need to do as a householder to make it better?
We need to do more composting. 60% of the garbage is compostable. We need to also have the discipline of packaging our garbage properly. Over the New Year's, I was in New York, right? And whenever I go and walk the streets in Manhattan and thing. And people are walking the streets with garbage on the streets, but it's packaged properly and put out for the collection to happen. And then the other thing is that they don't have to worry about the situation of stray dogs there.
No, they don't.
Right? Or people coming and rummaging through it. So it's a matter of organization. I mean, you can never have enough garbage trucks to service a country that doesn't dispose of garbage properly.
Even though you are getting your new trucks this year. Folks, so we've got a lot to talk about in the show. Stay with us after the break. We're talking politics.
But first, let's take a look back at some of the top business stories of the week.
At number 5, the government in Russia resigned on Wednesday, just hours after President Vladimir Putin proposed sweeping constitutional changes that could prolong his stay in power. If approved by the public, the proposals would transfer power from the presidency to parliament. Mr. Putin is due to step down in 2024 when his 4th term of office comes to an end. But there is speculation he could seek a new role or hold on to power behind the scenes. At number 4, the US and China have signed an agreement to ease their ongoing trade war. US President Donald Trump said the pact would be transformative for the US economy, while Chinese leaders called it a win-win deal that would help foster better relations between the two countries. China has pledged to boost US imports by $200 billion above 2017 levels and strengthen intellectual property rules. In exchange, the US has agreed to cut some of the new tariffs it has imposed on Chinese products. At number 3, Jamaica closed out 2019 with a December inflation rate of 0.5%. This resulted in a calendar year inflation rate of 6.2%. This was just outside the Bank of Jamaica's inflation target range of 4 to 6%. The Statistical Institute of Jamaica Statin says the upward movement in December of 0.5% was mainly as a result of a 1.5% increase in the index for the division housing water, electricity, gas, and other fuels, and a 0.5% increase in the division for food and non-alcoholic beverages. At number 2, Jamaica's import bill for January to September 2019 exceeded $4.8 billion. This represented an increase of 6.5% when compared to the $4.5 billion worth of goods imported over the similar period in 2018. Half of that sum was spent on imports from the USA, which is Jamaica's leading trading partner. Meanwhile, revenue from exports during the period dropped to 9% to settle at just under $1.27 billion. At number 1 this week, the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association, JMEA, has expressed alarm at what it calls yet another round of high volatility and unavailability of foreign currency in the market. The JME says during December, the Jamaican dollar revalued dramatically, selling for $131 to $1. And now, with just over 2 weeks gone in the new year, not only has the Jamaican dollar lost over 3% of its value, but it is also not available. The organization argues that the cycle of volatility and lack of liquidity is seriously impacting the productive sector as companies are unable to meet obligations to suppliers and to do normal business. The JME says in the short term it wants the authorities to urgently intervene to make funds available to end users in the productive sector to meet their obligations. The organization is also calling for sustainable solutions to what it says has now become a recurring problem.
When we come back, folks, we are talking politics right here on Point. Welcome back to On Point. Now, in just a few weeks, the Andrew Holness-led government would have been in office for just about 4 years. In his New Year's message, Prime Minister Andrew Holness used the opportunity to highlight what he said are some of his achievements. Take a look.
Many great things have happened in 2019, which gives me great hope for 2020. Finance, lowest unemployment rate in the history of Jamaica, 7.8%. Longest period of consecutive growth in our history, 19 quarters. Record fall in our debt to GDP ratio, we are now at 93%. Record low inflation, introduction of special procurement incentives for medium and small enterprises. We removed the minimum business tax, reduced transfer tax from 5 to 2%. 1.5 million tax break. I hope you didn't forget that. Successfully completed the IMF program. In health, better cancer care through new radiation facilities, reducing waiting times at drugstore pharmacies. New helicopters in security, new maritime patrol aircraft for the JDF, new radar system, doubling the national security budget. You can now renew your passport online, new motorcycles for the police, major investments in forensics and DNA. Tourism, wow. Record tourism arrivals, approximately 4.5 million visitors. Record earnings, $3.8 billion. We launched the Tourism Workers Pension Fund, first in the Caribbean. In transport, we launched the Drive Safe app. We commissioned 2 new air traffic control towers. We implemented Wi-Fi on buses. We completed the pilot program for LNG in buses. In infrastructure, a record 400 roads resurfaced or rehabilitated. We did Mandela Highway, Marcus Garvey Drive, Ferris to Macfeed, Barbican, Hagley Park Road, Constance Spring, and 3 Miles Road, all almost complete. Education. Improved school feeding from 3 to 5 days, comprehensively increased the suite of benefits under the PATH program, increased maintenance grant for secondary level schools, 269 school canteens upgraded, successfully launched the PEP certified over 100 early childhood institutions, Labor and Social Security. We increased the minimum wage. We increased NIS benefits to pensioners. Significant increase in overseas employment figures. Culture, gender, and entertainment. 3 shelters being prepared for abused women. Sexual harassment bill tabled. First entertainment zone being renovated. Reggae inscribed on the UNESCO Intangible Cultural List for Humanity. The Blue and John Crow Mountains, now World Heritage Sites. Ports. Expansion of the Port of Kingston, new cruise ship terminal at Port Royal, and the redevelopment of the town of Port Royal has begun. And you get the picture. So much done and so much more to do in 2020.
And joining us now are political commentators Kevin O'Brien Chang and social commentator Javian Nelson. Welcome to On Point, gentlemen.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Let me start with you.
What public affairs commentator?
We'll take that, public affairs commentator. Well, let me ask you to make the first comment. It's been almost 4 years. Have you seen the kind of government you thought we would have gotten from an Andrew Holness-led administration?
But I tell you this, people ask me, I haven't seen any changes. The single biggest change I've seen with this administration, I came out of Jamaica from Canada, from school in 1989. And you always ask people how things going. And for years, all I hear is, no, go on, rough. I wouldn't say that 4 years, well, maybe 2 years recently. I don't hear that anymore. Most of the times I hear, ask them, is it going up, down, or staying the same? And most of them say it's improving. May not as much as they would want it to be, but I don't hear the level of grumbling I used to hear.
Where are you hearing?
It's a big change.
Where are you hearing that?
All over. People, people saying, come talk to you. Maybe gas stations, security guards, taxi drivers, and people come up and talk, engage you. And I always ask them, nobody engaged me. I say, okay, interested in public affairs, tell me what you think. And out of 80%, I'm hearing positives from. And as I said, it has been a big change. Because the same set of people used to ask, and to hear a lot of more grumbling. So that people say it's perfect, and they don't say it's as much as they would want. But it's improving. Crime is still a big issue, but it's always been. But I would say, based on the vox pops out there, people are generally pleased with what they have seen with this government.
What would you say, Javian, are the things that they should have done?
Well, I think I agree with Kevin. There's been some highs, some lows. I think where the government is concerned, a number of us would have loved to see more action on corruption in particular. I think that would have been really good. There was lots of talks about prosperity for all. when the government campaigned, and we've had lots of economic progress, but for a number of people, they're still not necessarily feeling that kind of progress. So there's palpable hope that people have, but a number of people are still not feeling that. If you look at the new polls that you're seeing, people still saying unemployment, for example, is a big issue for them because so many people are employed in low-paid jobs, etc. So I think that's a huge issue that the government has to tackle. I don't know if they can do that in this last year of their administration.
Or however long it's going to be.
Or however long it will be.
There's all kinds of speculation.
But certainly I think that is something that should have been worked on. And then of course crime and violence, a huge issue which continues to impact on so many of us. I didn't believe the Prime Minister when he had said as opposition leader that if he wins, you can, sleep with your door open. But certainly, I think what people would have wanted would have been a little bit more progress where crime and violence is concerned.
But you can't sleep with your bedroom door open, right? But the door is outside.
Well, I don't even sleep with that open because you never know, more barriers, So I think it's really important that work happens in that regard, and the kinds of action that we saw at the start of last year, thankfully we don't see it this year again, where there's a lot of back and forth between both offices, the leader of opposition and the Prime Minister. But certainly we need to see some kind of bipartisan work by both parties around crime and violence, because no matter what, at the end of the day, our people are dying.
I want to come back to the observation that you made, Kevin, and ask you whether or not a lot of this is because of the optics, or people are actually, you get the sense that they're feeling it in their pockets. And I ask the question because one of the things that has been a strength of the Jamaica Labour Party this whole way has been communication, has been upselling, some people say, reality.
I actually disagree now.
Tell me about that.
When they don't have an information minister. That's a fundamental part of communication, crafting a narrative and a central message. And they give bits and pieces all over the place. They have social media pages, but where's a central narrative? As I said, it's the only administration I have ever seen without an information minister.
And still, I'm going to push back and challenge what you've said, because even in the absence of an information minister, and we've had ineffective information ministers that we can think of in the past, there has been no other party that has taken on social media in the kind of robust, cohesive way that we've seen coming out of the Jamaica Labour Party.
I would say robust, but I don't think that cohesive. As I said, the main thing is Mr. Honus's Facebook pages. And it's showing, and it's random. A social media thing is this, that. There's no crafted narrative. And then again, if you have a Facebook page, your main communication is the leader's Facebook page, right? Everybody is an appendage of the leader? Is a party an appendage, the minister's an appendage? It doesn't come across right. And as I say, I just don't see how every other administration, there have been some ineffective one, but they have all had one. And information minister not just giving information, and crafting a message. I think the JLP, give a simple thing. I'm not campaigning for nobody now. Just look and say, as a businessman, what you would do. They have done more infrastructure improvements in my experience in other administration, and I've been here since back here. But if you don't go across the island, you don't see them. You only see the ones in your area. Is there one place you can go and see all the places, the Macfield and the 3 Mile and the St. Thomas all going on? One place? No. It's basic. You said, well, people should be able to look and see other than one place. They can't. Again, I think it's because they don't have somebody in charge, information minister, doing all that stuff. But that's just my view, though. Hey, what do I know?
Do you think the perception by people is that it's hodgepodge?
No, I feel like most people I know feel it's well coordinated. I mean, you see a lot of support between ministries, which I can't ever recall seeing, if one minister tweets something, another minister or member of parliament is saying congratulations and love the work that you're doing. I believe GIS does a fairly good job in saying these are some of the things that the government is working on. The challenge is that not a lot of us really see GIS as that source of information from the government. But I feel the JLP, as the administration now, has really done a very good job where communication is concerned, and the optics, as you say. I've always felt that an important part of the governance of any country really is the optics, how you get people to buy into a vision, and that you have to get people into that vision so that people can believe. so that people can hope, so that people can want to move forward. But if there's no vision, there's no dream, then it's going to be always difficult for people, particularly younger people, to really feel anything is happening, you know? And that's why for so long we had this huge feeling from so many people right across the board, nothing now go on, because you don't know what's happening, people aren't communicating, ministers are refusing to talk to the media, that kind of thing. I think the challenge now where the government is concerned is how much more can they get out so that people can really see, as Kevin is saying, that a lot is happening.
I want to agree a little bit with Kevin. You see what I say happening, development is happening, but I call it chaotic development.
The implementation? The
implementation.
Absolutely.
Is chaotic. So roads are being built, and you can comment to Kevin, roads are being built, and the infrastructure is in place. It seems to be done in a very slapdash way.
And in the finish. It's taking a length of time.
Yes. And the roads are there, and then you have this indiscipline on the road. So as soon as the roads finish, the vendors come back out on the road, and the taxis are...
Well, again, listen, Andrew Holness, like every other leader, has his flaws, right? He has a lot of good stuff. But one flaw, I think, as I say, come back even with the communication, kind of a one-man band kind of thing is coming across.
One-man band as in all parties around Andrew Holness, and he is the star of the show? That kind of one-man band?
Look at the education minister, Mr. Samuda. Nothing wrong with Mr. Samuda, but he is in his senior years. Education is perhaps the toughest ministry. You think how young, energetic, somebody willing to go there and lots of energy, youthful energy, relatively. Mr. Samuda is kind of in Mr. Holness, the Prime Minister's office, and you get a feeling that he wants control.
But perhaps that's the strategy. Jamaica has a history of voting for prime ministers and parties as opposed to the actual candidate within their constituency.
Nothing wrong with a prime minister who's popular. And listen, Andrew Holness, in my view, is probably the most popular prime minister since Michael Manley. Mm-hmm. He's massively popular out there, bro God, the young people. He has
oh, you know it.
He's kind of bilingual, you know. When I say bilingual, he can speak the technocratic language. He's very at home when you hear him technocratic stuff. And in fact, he gets kind of boring sometimes. But then the street song, the bro God, let's face it, the man grew up in a board house in St. Spanish Town Primary, St. Catherine High. It's not exactly uptown background. Mm-hmm. So he's one of the masses. So he connects to the masses very easily. Yes. And so his popularity is not in doubt. I'm talking about implementation. Everything comes from him. There's no delegation. The kind of a team kind of set up. And they always say leaders, great leaders can do, but they delegate to. And you get that feeling that maybe there could be more delegation. And then I come back to the information minister thing. So I don't know. Listen, it's all speculation. I don't know the inner beings. But we see the things going on. And as I said, the hodgepodge of the fixing, the hodgepodge of the communication. So you get things going on, things happening. And it's good, so because many times in the past, nothing was happening. Mm-hmm. But could they happen a little more in a better coordinated way? That's the question.
So Javian, following up on what Kevin said, is it that your perception that things are good is really when you compare it to the opposition then? So maybe it's the opposition's weakness making it seem good?
Well, not necessarily the opposition. I think, what a lot of us have said over the last couple of years is that the bar has been so low for so many years that even by just merely communicating with the public, that is just almost a radical action by a government,
being
right?
Accessible.
Being accessible. So I think, there are lots of challenges, but things are being done. Some things just all over the place, like the roadworks, for example, the chaos it caused right across the city. You go to other places, the roadwork isn't being done so properly, no proper signage, etc. Yeah. Something that the previous JLP administration for 2007 to 2011 was considered as is really getting order in the city, for example. That's something that a number of my friends had commented on, but now we have, just chaos all over the place, garbage not being collected properly, taxi driver, private vehicles, JUTC buses just doing whatever they want on the road. So certainly I hope that's something that the government is going to consider fixing, but I guess there's just so much to do. What a lot of people have said too, I remember talking to some people about this whole idea of the Prime Minister having so many things under his belt, and on his plate. And I guess that contributes to the firm and strong kind of label and the builder that he is. But when we were looking and thinking of some of the ministries and the things that were among the better things that the government is doing, seemingly quite a number of them were related to those under his control. What this sets is maybe a precedence that we perhaps need to be very careful about in the future, that we want a prime minister so executive and having so many things under their control. But certainly I think it speaks to the critical need for public sector reform. We need a public sector that actually works, which has been in the pipeline like local government reform for so long. But certainly if it is that those that are going to be able to perform so well come under one kind of big house, then we have to be very careful, because we don't want a big yard government.
We have to look at this whole matter of corruption that has been a stain on the last 4 years of the administration. There have been instances, certainly the biggest of the lots would have been the one most recent, still hanging in the balance with Royal Reed, and there are questions around
whether or not... You don't think Petroleum was bigger than this one?
Well, I mean, the verdict is still out on what is happening with Royal Reed, but there was Petrojam and there were others. Corruption is one of the things that has been a stain on the Andrew Holness administration. Will it affect the vote?
Everything is relative, right? And yes, he could have done better to control it, but on his credit, the ledger side, they have resigned. Mr. Wheatley resigned, and Mr. Reed will resign or fired. In the past, the former energy minister, we had many instances of youthful exuberance. He never resigned. So if the comparison, maybe the bar is kind of low, but we saw some action. But again, yes, more could be done. And the problem is that the opposition keeps hammering corruption, but where are they? Look at Trafigura. Trafigura is still hanging. It has not been resolved. And you keep telling me, clean up this thing. Yeah, but you're dirty too. But so I'll give the big point though is, the big point, since 1990, not a single Jamaican MP has ever been convicted of a crime. You have leaders all over the world. Leaders, former leaders, Costa Rica, Panama, many all over the place, locked up. Not a single MP. So nobody can convince me that whatever the rhetoric out front, behind doors, the PNP and the JLP, make sure, let's gentlemen, none of us now go to jail,
You're of the belief that there are MPs who have committed crimes?
It would be miraculous. Okay, we have two options here. Either we have MPs have committed things and either cover up for each other, or Jamaica's the cleanest politicians in the world. Which alternative do you think
one
is the more...
One seems highly unlikely.
You won't say which one. but
I don't say, but how many countries, 30 years, not a single MP ever got jail? PNP or JLP? Cross-party stitch up, in my view, but hey, maybe I'm a cynic.
But Javan, is that, you think, that is the reason, because the Prime Minister has, we have seen resignations under the scandals here. We didn't see resignations in the past. Would that be one of the reasons why people say, although almost 50% of people say that corruption is a big problem, they still think that this administration can handle it better than the opposition?
Yeah, I think there has been, to some extent, a level of openness at different points, and seemingly very strategic and critical points, like when the Prime Minister went to the Area 1 Council meeting and spoke about corruption to the Labourites and said, we can't tolerate this kind of thing. So I feel those things have really contributed to people's perception. So we have the 64% of people say, well, corruption is an issue, them corrupt, right? But most people say it's not going to affect their vote, and most people say, well, I believe Andrew Holness is better prepared to address, or better able to address corruption. And I think that's why, at least you've had some resignations, you have a kind of conversation, because as much as we hate rhetoric sometimes, rhetoric is an important part of how you practice politics, I would believe. And I think that kind of openness really helps people to be convinced that at least I talk about this something, right? Because this is a very corrupt country. Right? It's how many people get by. A lot of us think that it's okay to do it so that you can get ahead in society, and we all do a little thing and here and there. And so people are not going to necessarily see what a lot of these things, how a lot of these things impact on them, which is why I believe, for example, the CMU education ministry scandal is so huge, because at least now this is something that is talking about my child's education, my education, my their medication in the future, whatever. Unlike Petrojam, well, most people don't really have a car as much as we have too much vehicles in the country. So it's not people not necessarily translating it like that, and it doesn't help that the advocates, and especially in civil society, have not really been able to say, this is how corruption impacts you, right? We talk about it on the big scale and how we need to change laws, but people need to know how it affects their pocket, how it affects your health, how it affects your well-being, and we're not really getting that, right? But at least now there's some kind of conversation.
Kevin, I give you the very last word.
We did the LA Pop study about 20 countries across Latin America. Jamaica is actually seen the third least corrupt. Only Guyana and Barbados got lower corruption ratings about the country overall and the leader and the prime minister. So in the context of Latin America, we're not that corrupt.
I said last word and I meant it. Out of 10, Andrew Holness administration for the last 4 years, what score would you have given them, 10 being the highest?
I'd say 7.5, and with proper coordination could be 8.5, 9.
Thank you so much for joining us, Kevin O'Brien Chang. You're staying with us, Javion. We're going to be continuing this conversation. We're talking politics on Point. Thank you so much for staying with us right here on Point, folks. We're still talking politics, but we're shifting the age far from Dennis's, and we're talking about youth. Youth, how do they see politics, politicians, Jamaica run by politicians? We're talking about it. Javion Nelson staying with us, but we're also joined by Montel Hill, who is a youth advocate. Hey, thanks for staying with us, gentlemen.
Yeah, man, welcome. So, Montel, let me start with you, since you weren't here before. What is your view on what's happening in the political environment now from a youth perspective?
The political environment is very dynamic at the moment. Many issues taking place. We see one, a youthful prime minister, I didn't say young, particularly a youthful prime minister who is appealing to the culture of the youth. He's using social media as that important tool in order to communicate messages, appealing to the ethos of persons. Secondly, we see on the political stage many issues, youth issues, personal identity issues, issues of self-esteem, which now dominates the political space. Historically, politics was really about the mass, about the group, the collective responsibility. Now we are seeing where consumerism has taken over. We're seeing where persons are now looking at what can this do for me, sort of thing. So that aspect of it sort of caused a decline in the voter turnout, particularly among the youthful population. So we should see a decline in that if we are unable to bring more stuff to focus so that we can appeal to the youth in the country. We see Damian Crawford as well exiting the political scene.
Javion, do politicians need the youth vote?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, young people make up a significant portion of this country, so certainly politicians need the youth vote. And I would like to think that any party that's either looking to take somebody out of power needs the youth vote, because young people perhaps are the larger part of the population of voting age that's not voting. And so certainly, if you really want to get into power, then you need to work with young people, but you can't use young people at the last stage. You know, you can't decide to want the youth vote at the end stage when it's near to an election and say, we're going to try and attract young people. It has to be something that you work around consistently, engaging and listening and mobilizing young people. It's almost like a family function at the end of the year. You know, you can't think that you're going to get all the cousins that you never ever talk to and don't like, right? And then invite them to the family function because you want it to be big. They're not going to come, right? Only the people that you talk to and engage throughout the year are going to come. And I think it's the same thing for politics, or politicians on both sides need to begin to engage young people more, not to patronize young people, not to treat them as tokens, but to recognize that they're an important part of this country, and that if we're actually going to have a Vision 2030, a national development plan that's working towards ensuring that every single person is empowered to achieve their fullest potential, it means that you need to better involve young people as a part of the political process for voting, and importantly, after they have voted, how do you ensure that they're engaged, they're sitting on boards, that they're able to speak openly and freely about their views, that they don't have to think that if I come on a program like On Point and say what I think about the government, then I may be victimizing in a way, because a number of young people feel that they can't say anything about politicians. And so they're opting out of the process because of all of these challenges that they may face if they speak up.
Yeah, but Montel, listen to what Javian said. I agree, young people are a critical mass. But some people say, let's run off them out. Why waste some time? Because the election day come and they say, boy, you know what? I don't feel like going. I was partying too late last night and I'm just not going to vote. So there a lot of talk, but no action to back it up.
And to be fair, it's not only partying last night. There are still very many young people who say, my voice is not voting.
Yes, yeah.
My voice not going to the polls is a signal to both parties that both of you
which don't make any sense.
I don't know if it sent that message.
I think that a lot of persons within the society underestimate the power of the youth. When you look at the voting population, about 25, in the age bracket 25 to 50, that accounts for more than half of the voters, the eligible voters in Jamaica. When we also consider the importance of young people and how they use the social media to influence others, that's also powerful. Politics is not just for the time, but we have to also put in the plan in order to convince the persons and to get them to be supporters of your party. So when we are planning, we not only plan for now when we're winning an election, it's to frame a philosophy and to do the work so that persons can be committed to my political party. And that's where youth are important. Also, we have to also train the youth, teach them the role. Some people will say teach them the ropes of the game, so that they won't think that politics is all about self-aggrandizement, is about personal gain, is about making a money. When I have talk with the young people like myself, they say, yeah, I will go into politics because it's a big money thing. Mm-hmm. Well, politicians really don't get a large chunk of salary. Mm-hmm. And there are questions that are asked, where do they get the money?
Damian Crawford is saying he's coming out of representational politics because it is broke in his pocket, that it is costing him, costing his business, and he's stepping aside to be able to work on that. And I asked the question about, you see something that's disproportionate with the two parties. You look on. Within the People's National Party, who are hoping to become the next government, who are the young people? And what is the position that they hold within the party?
I don't know if you see that many on one side, and I think that has been a problem. I think people want to feel that you're not just talking about young people, but both parties actually recognize that the young people have value, that they're not, as I said before, tokens, so that you need to see them as campaign organizers, not just the foot runners, but they also need to get some sort of seat. You need to see young people being able to stand up and say, I want to represent this constituency, and that the party is allowing them. And I think the PNP, for example, erred in the last election when there were some young people, for example, like Raymond Price, that I know a number of young people on social media were just saying, this just does not look right. This was another better performing parliamentarians, read before he came to parliament, contributed to parliamentary discussions, with many of them don't seem to do, and that seemingly has impacted on the perception many people have of the People's National Party. On the side of the JLP, I have seen where a number of people feel that some of the better performing members of parliament on the JLP side are some of those who have been given a chance to become an MP, but also have been given a chance to be a minister of state, and they are performing and they're working and convincing people. Because I think these things really, going back to what you asked about young people voting, really help young people, much as I'm not maybe 25, but it helps us to feel that there is hope, that we can buy into a vision, right? And to recognize that we can participate in a much better way by voting and by holding government accountable once you have voted. And I think it's important that we help young people understand that, okay, if it is that you aren't voting because this is how you want to send a signal to the politicians, whether or not they hear it or see it, that you still have an important role to play post-election. And that, I think, is perhaps one of the most important roles, because we have to hold our leaders accountable. We have to ensure that every single parliamentarian is working for the young people, working for the old people, working for people with disability, working for every single Jamaican.
The
I don't think
question
we're
is
doing that
how,
good.
and that is something that if you were to challenge some of the young people now and ask them, what power do you hold as a citizen of this country? What power do you hold to be able to say to the people who are servants of the people, you're not doing your job? Many of them wouldn't be able to say, this is the power I hold. They couldn't answer. They don't know what their avenues are to be able to advocate for change.
And I believe that because many of them are not educated about the political process and what politics would have done in the past. Many of the social changes that occurred in society, re-education, re-healthcare, it was as a result of a collective understanding that we need this to change. Also, when we think about young people being involved in politics, active representational politics, we're thinking about the economic backing that comes with youth. Many persons don't have faith in the youth. They believe that, oh, this young man is youthfully exuberant, so he's just going to spend my money and waste it. So when we think about that, we have to consider also campaign financing. And campaign financing where it shouldn't be because I have the big wigs that is supporting my political campaign, or I'm of a particular business sect or anything like that, that I gain a political advantage where money is concerned. It should be that we balance the thing as it relates to campaign funding. So say, for example, create a fund within the country that really gives each candidate an equal amount. When we're running Guild campaign at UE, we have campaign funding issues as well. And they said there's a rate that you don't go above, an amount that you don't go above.
You can't spend above it.
You can't spend above it, or else you'll be disqualified.
We have that as well.
We have that in Jamaica.
We have that as well in our general elections. There is a figure that you're not supposed, you ought not
But
go
you
above.
see a constituency in an election where a whole lot of renter cars, and then they report that they spend $50 in the election. So,
and that becomes an issue of checks and balances, the accountability side of things, and who is checking that what you've declared is actually what you did in fact spend,
I think
and challenging it.
The big thing with young people is, I think oftentimes when we talk about accountability and encouraging young people to participate in the processes, we make it seem as though it's something very hard. And I take a little bit of responsibility as somebody as a part of civil society. I don't think we give the people the tools enough, right? We have to begin to democratize how we do advocacy and activism around the good governance of our country. We have to let people be able to do things. And I keep saying to some young people when I train them, you don't have to do anything big. If it means every time you stop to ask one politician to take a picture, whisper a question to them, what happened to this, what you did say I could do? And you move on. That's accountability. Write a letter. Enough people don't really want to write, but even if it means just writing a tweet.
We're having a conversation before, right? I find that young persons today are not as involved and committed to the social issues as before. So it takes you 100 times more effort to get a young person to act today. Maybe because of the American influence and that sort of thing, but you don't see it. I mean, when I was at university, when Siaga raised the cess, we locked down the university for 3 days. And when March got JBC at the time, right? and Ministry of Finance, it don't happen now.
I don't think that it's with the era, the change of the mindset of persons. Persons are really more individualistic now and self-serving per se. You see, politics, it should be about serving people. Most persons, young people who get into politics now, most of them, when you listen to them, we look at East Portland by-election and some of the things that were said on the platform. A man coming from the East, and he's going to be Prime Minister, right? So it's about power. But we should think that there are 3 things that are powerful in our performance. 1, people. The second one is personality. And the third is power. people comes first, personality, and then you gain power. Many times, we put the person first, then the power second, or the power first, the person second, and then the people after. The politics of yesteryear in the 1980s, in the 1970s, was about collective action.
Yes,
they were
yes.
fighting about, when they sang the song Message, I listened to it. And it spoke about the school, it spoke about free education, it spoke about no bastard, no day again. It has, and there was this electrifying feeling around unity and about transformation. The politics of today, not necessarily about transformation. So university students are not willing to go out there and protest about Petrojam because it doesn't personally affect them. But they will go out there and speak about tuition, because when I get into an exam and I start doing the exam, but they don't understand that the Petrojam issue affect in a non-direct way the tuition issue. So we have to be able to appreciate the political climate and know that money management is at play. So if you take from one area or you steal from one area, you're at a shortfall.
Gentlemen, I'm getting the rap signal, but are we talking about politics too early?
No, I feel like this is the year something is going to happen. A lot of us feel like election will happen this year, but even if it doesn't happen this year, we're in the election cycle because it's constitutional due early next year. So certainly now is when everybody's going to make sure that the house is in order and that they're really, really ready to make an impact on the population and get the vote.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for talking to us, Javion Nelson, and also Montel Hill. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Not Montel Williams, Montel Hill.
Montel Hill. We'll take a quick break, folks. When we come back, the word on the street and the numbers. Welcome back to On Point. Now, Prime Minister Andrew Holness used his New Year's message to highlight some of what he called the successes of the government. Take a look at some of the numbers.
Jamaica's unemployment rate dropped to 7.8% in 2019, the lowest in the country's history. Also in 2019, Jamaica recorded its 19th quarter of economic growth, representing the longest period of consecutive growth in the country's history. Approximately 4.5 million tourists visited the island in 2019. This saw the industry raking in some $3.8 billion during the year. 400 roads were either resurfaced or rehabilitated last year. During the year, some 800 million Jamaican dollars was invested in rural water, which brought water to Jamaicans who didn't have it. Over 27,000 new housing starts were constructed between the National Housing Trust NHT and the Housing Agency of Jamaica HAJ in 2019. 9 billion Jamaican dollars was used to pay off streetlight debt to the Jamaica Public Service Company last year, and over 25,000 young people were trained through the government's Housing Opportunity Production and Employment HOPE program in 2019.
And our On Point team hit the streets and asked, how would you rate the performance of the Andrew Holness administration in 2019?
I think it's good. See a lot of road works, building, employment is not so bad. You know, people is getting work. The first for a long time I see sign on the door say people want, employment needed. So not bad. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I believe he did a good job in 2019, especially for the youth. He really reached the youth. I see there's an increase in opportunities and jobs for the youth. The youth, which was a very untapped population over the years. But there's always room for improvement. So let's see what he will do for 2020.
He did some really great stuff for Jamaica. One thing I can say bad is just the violence, and he don't really got the control of that. But something that he really did impress me. If I supposed to be voting, to tell the truth, I'd vote for Andrew Holness. Yes. One of the really main thing I really admire about him is he's putting Jamaica first.
All right. Well, I didn't really see that much changes. It was steadily all right. It was 2019. There's not that much going on, but it was still pretty much okay here.
To me, with crime, him totally failed the country. Him can't handle the crime situation. I mean, the previous administration, it wasn't so bad. But really, in his administration, it bad totally. You know, get out of hand. Them can't handle it.
It was very good, successful. Why? Because what was going on from the beginning, them wasn't doing any good. But now I see improvement to what I'm doing. But it's one thing, it's a crime. We want to get rid of now.
I think it's interesting for us to look at the second half of the discussion first. For me, I have to call names. When I think about the Jamaica Labour Party and the youth quotient in the party, you've got Floyd Green down there in St. Elizabeth, who is getting good commendations from the people on the ground. You've got Alanda Terry-Long, who the PNP have just put in somebody to be the new candidate to go up against him. But for all intents and purposes, you've got an Alanda Terry-Long who apparently is working in his constituency. You've got senators. You've got people like Robert, who is now heading up the communications arm of the government, and you're seeing changes there. You've got other young people in the fold who you see the youth in action within the Jamaica Labour Party. A People's National Party who want to come in government if they're looking for the youth vote. The narrative is different. Damian Crawford stepping away from representational politics. Dayton Campbell just barely making it back into the shadow cabinet after being one of those who was very vocal against a Peter Phillips-led administration. So too Carrie Douglas, who now is, you feel tension happening in the party.
You don't see a Raymond Price.
You don't see a Raymond Price. And so if the youth vote is something that is supposed to be important to political parties stepping in, and if youth want to see themselves in the process, see themselves reflected in the parties, the PNP has work to do.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons why you see that even though the polls show that people have a problem with the current administration in terms of corruption, they're still saying yes, but they still will be able to handle the things like crime and corruption and all of those things better. So I think a lot of that creates that paradox, you know, in people's perception and views, because people are saying, listen, we're really not satisfied, you know, but hey.
Lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
I want us to get to a place where the voting process is not about the lesser of two evils, and that lesser of two evils is still keeping a lot of young people away from the political process. For them, I am protesting by not voting. But I don't know if that act of protest is actually hurting either of the two political parties who are still pandering to the base.
Yeah, I don't think it helps to say that you're going to protest by not voting. I think it's a very naive way to think, because the fact that you don't vote, it means that you have not contributed to the process. And I think that's the responsibility of every citizen to contribute to it. And I think that's the reason why young people don't vote across the world, you know, because they are not, I guess maybe they don't have the experience enough to connect enough to the issues, you know, and so it's a problem.
Almost 4 years of an Andrew Holness-led government. What do you think? How do you think the performance has been?
You know, I would agree with Kevin. I would say a 7 out of 10 could be better. I think there are things that could have been done for us to get much better economic numbers that they've attempted to do some, but you know, we still, I don't know if it's a lack of understanding of what the issues are, because the truth is that you can't have growth without law and order, you know. You have to have structure, you have to have discipline, and we have not been able to address those things for whatever reason. So, as I said earlier in the show, I think it's a lot of chaotic development is happening. Development is happening, but there's no order, there's no structure to it. You don't feel the structure to that development.
Well, the
I think that's
political
a real
buzz certainly
issue.
in the air. I look forward to seeing how this will play out on both sides. But that's where we're going to have to wrap the show today, folks. I've got to say a big thank you to the team making the show happen today. Thank you so very much to all of you hardworking production folks. Thanks to you, the viewers, for tuning in week after week. I'm Patria K. Charles.
And I'm Dennis Chung. Until next week.
On Point was brought to you by Dargin Global.